Hello, and welcome to Discovery, Knight Foundation's program on the arts. Thank you for joining us. I'm Priya Sircar. A new year has brought COVID-19 vaccinations, and along with those, some hope for the end of the pandemic. Right now, a lot of us are thinking back on the past year and reflecting on the trauma and growth that we've gone through. Today, we'll explore the experience of creating art amid distress and amid a year of unprecedented challenges and the unexpected gifts and lessons that come with it and that we can take forward into the future. So we have two guests today who will be in conversation on this topic. Jennifer Harge is a choreographer and the founder and artistic director of Harge Dance Stories in Detroit. She's a past winner of the Night Arts Challenge and a Kresge Fellow. She'll be sharing her experience developing the latest iteration of her performance piece, Fly Drown, over the past several months through a residency and artistic exchange called Trade School, established by our other guest, Sarah Bishop Stone. Sarah is founder of the Philadelphia Thing. She connects and supports artists, producers, and curators, helping them to advance their artistic practice. Jennifer and Sarah, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So, as you both know, I recently had the opportunity to tune in to an episode or an edition of Trade School in which, Jennifer, you shared your latest evolution of Fly Drown. And I was really struck by how both of you in your artistic practice, Jennifer, and also Sarah, in your evolution of the artist residency that is Trade School, had to adapt to what was happening and how you kind of worked through evolving your artwork or evolving the residency itself. And I think, Sarah, we started talking about Trade School, I think along with your collaborator, Sharina Zob of Host of People, which is a Detroit theater organization, before the pandemic, certainly, maybe in fall of 2019. And so, I know then we reconnected and just kept the conversation going. And, I and our team at Knight Foundation were just really, interested and impressed by how you kind of just started to think differently about what that exchange and residency could be for artists, and what artists needed in this time. And then, of course, Jennifer, I was so struck by, your sharing your artistic process as you iterated on Fly Drown, and as you talked with your collaborators on that piece, about just what that experience was like, coming through this process. And so I'm really excited for our viewers to also hear you two in conversation about what you've learned and maybe what you discovered about yourselves and your work, that you might take forward into the future. I just quickly want to let viewers know that we will have a brief Q&A toward the end after Jennifer and Sarah have a conversation. I'll be back toward the end of the show to moderate that. So please put your questions for them into the chat function of whatever platform you're watching it on. And I think we'll also have, some ways that you can switch to another platform if you're not seeing a chat function. So if you're watching from our website, you can head to Facebook or YouTube to ask questions in the comments, or to submit your questions with #NightLive on Twitter. And then our team will be able to submit those questions for Jennifer and Sarah. So to start the two of you off in your conversation, first, we'd like to give viewers a taste of Fly Drown by sharing the trailer. Let's go to that.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Jennifer. Every time I see that work, I'm struck again. It's so beautiful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. And for those watching, a little context from about that trailer. That is, sorry, first of all, my name is Jennifer Harge. Hello. Thank you, Priya and Knight, for having us here today to talk through our current artistic practices and lives. I am based in what we now know as Detroit on Anishinaabe land, and I am the artistic director of a movement collective in Detroit called Harge Dance Stories. And the latest piece that I created with a team of Detroit-based collaborators is called Fly Drowned. It began as a performance installation, a social sculpture that took place at the Detroit Artist Market in 2019. And it was a piece thinking about Black women in domesticity in the ways in which Black women have used their homes as a site of refuge and a site of self-discovery. And so that took place in the fall of 2019. And since then has been branching into other worlds, film being one of those iterations. And so the film trailer you just saw is the beginning of our next area of research, thinking about what could be excavated through telling the story through film. And that's something that we had been thinking about pre-pandemic, but when the opportunity to work with trade school came about, we were able to really amplify what it would mean to think about the piece cinematically and not just in the live performance. So I'll talk a little bit more about what we did through our trade school experience. Maybe Sarah, you could talk a little bit about the trade school program, and then I can talk about my own experience with trade school.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me echo Jennifer's gratitude for the invitation from Priya and from Knight. I am here in Philadelphia on Lenni Lenape land, and the program trade school, which is this kind of signature program of my organization, the Philadelphia thing, started as a way to connect artists between cities, and to connect artists to other artists, and to connect them with resources that might advance their practice beyond just having to go through the kind of few and kind of rarefied presenting institutions in other cities, but instead connect artists to other artists, and knowing that they all have they know best kind of the resources in each city and how to make work there. So when we were first chatting with Knight about trade school, it was obviously going to be a physical exchange. We were going to bring Philly artists to Detroit. We were going to bring Detroit artists to Philly to share practice, to perform, and also to share meals and potluck and all of those good things that happen in pre-pandemic times. Mm-hmm. When the pandemic hit, it became really clear that kind of the most urgent way that we could support artists was with direct, unrestricted funding. And really, I mean, what has been both surprising and also not surprising at all is sort of we felt like, Shireen Azab and I, Shireen, as Priya mentioned, is my partner, curatorial and producing partner in Detroit. And we really thought we were kind of lowering the stakes saying like, just we'll give you a big bunch of money and like you barely have to have any outcome. Just use it for whatever you need to use it for. Some like we understand this time has completely decimated our industry and the opportunities for performing and for making money that artists normally use to survive. And so if you need to use this to pay your rent, if you need to use this to, like we have, all we want to do is check in with you at the end of the year and see what you did. And it turns out actually that, a couple of things happened. One is that our timeline really extended. And that's something that we have been hearing from artists too, that the pace of everything has kind of shifted. And by kind of extending that timeline, it really, it offered some opportunities to explore unexpected places. And so we were really like delighted by to see what folks had come up with at the end of this time.
Two things you just said that were really helpful for me as an artist in the trade school program. But unrestricted funds is like, needs to be the way.
Yeah.
Because in that, so for us, I walked into trade school with one idea, and I was able, though, because of something being unrestricted, to completely flip that idea halfway through the process without having to be like, is that going, we went on our course, you know what I mean? And I'm thinking too, if it were to have been a live performance, and I decided 2 weeks prior to like flip the thing on its head beyond just like choreographically doing that, because I do that as a director, but just like the crew of folks in the piece. But that would really affect a lot of other people to have done that kind of flip halfway through, like a production flip basically, and a thematic flip. And so I think there's something about it being unrestricted funds to use how we needed to use them. And then to also like be able to listen to what the piece is trying to do and not have to fit into some particular kind of exhibition model that could work, but like I'm trying to make it work. And so, yeah, I'm reminded of how important it was to, for the stakes to be low enough to like make changes, play with that, come back to something. And then really for us, it was like, well, whatever we have by that Thursday is what we'll show. Not like trying to, you know what I mean? Me and my team of collaborators are just really brilliant artists who, like serious about their crafts as we all are. And so they're like, we're not going to show anything, but it still was a way to be like, but if we have to start and stop during the showing, or if we have to do whatever it could have been the case, like I always felt like there was space to do that.
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, we kind of lowered the stakes to make it informal, the presentation, but also like just enough to give you a deadline, something just enough of a timeline, so that, I think like timelines and deadlines can be so supportive for artists, and trying to do that in a way, I heard somebody describe 2020 as like the year of the rough draft, like in a way that we're just not expecting anything to be finished or polished or complete, but in a way that's also, that was also the idea of the exchange, where the, instead of being able to bring artists together, in physical proximity and like actual shared practice or those kind of informal, like alchemical conversations that happen, I think sharing these works between, in these kind of almost arbitrary pairings, I have to say. It ended up kind of being like, who felt ready at what point in the timeline and who was able to share on those nights. But it was always like so interesting to identify where artists from Philly, from Detroit, are grappling with similar questions or asking, similar modes. There was a lot of ritual. There was a lot, there were just these really, really rich themes that kept coming out. And being able to like dip into all of these works at a point in the process was, I think, really rich for that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it really, for me, it helped to then like see where we were going, where like in 2020, in that rough draft space, like I wasn't even thinking about what was happening after. It was like true, like operating at like a 10%. And like that didn't necessarily feel bad to me. Like I like to operate at a 10% for long periods of time. I need to operate on like a low frequency creatively like that for a long period of time, just to know what needs to happen next. And so now, but like having that deadline, as you said, then like it propelled something after having that kind of lull. Like I got more clarity on what we could do, like what the possibilities were moving forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel that too. We really, I mean, we had a few meetings of the kind of the whole cohort over Zoom, obviously, and definitely one of the common threads was really about pace and how, sometimes we're used to like using adrenaline to finish our work, and to get it out there, and the kind of removal of that, and instead just making it a little more introspective, a little slower. Has definitely been a common thread.
Sure. I see there are questions in the chat.
And I'm back. That's my cue. Thank you, guys. We have some great questions from folks, and your conversation has sparked some questions for me as well. So we'll weave in as much as we can. So one question is that's been shared by a viewer, and I might tie this a little bit to Jennifer, to a comment that you made earlier about how Fly Drown has evolved from this earlier iteration. So the question is, have the forced changes of COVID-19 to performing arts changed the accessibility of the field for aspiring artists and for audiences? And I wonder, this I would love to hear, from each of you, if you have thoughts on this. Jennifer, I also was just curious as I thought back to something you shared about how you were thinking of using, of telling the story filmically. So curious about that, because your background originates in performance, but I also remember during the trade school sharing, you were talking about starting to think of it is almost like an installation piece, and then of course weaving in film. And so, how do you think about that as a performing artist?
Yeah, something I've been able to learn just about Fly Drown period, and I think the trade school experience just helped me to like get even clearer on this particular learning, is like how to see my work prismically. And so I feel like the live performance was like one side, but there are other sides to the prisms, right? And so I feel like the film is like helping me to understand another side. And so I'm thinking about how my own work can like have many lives under one umbrella, so that I'm not tied to any rigidity around what I'm making, or like any fixed notion of what I do. But like it felt like I was able to like, what is that? Like step into things I wouldn't like call myself like a director, like a film director. But as Devin and I are working, like I'm clear, I can clearly see like how we need to be moving. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, that is direction though. And so I think as an aspiring artist, something I would say is that like we actually know how to do lots of things in the field, even if we haven't ever called ourselves those things. I was never called myself a visual artist prior to Fly Drown. Like making the installation and making choices about the installation helped me understand like that was tied into my practice too. It wasn't just movement.
Great, thanks. And Sarah, I mean, you're as a curator too, and even through whether within trade school or other work that you do, you're working with folks in a lot of different disciplines, including certainly different performing arts disciplines. What are you seeing in what the work you're doing or the folks that you're working with?
I mean, it definitely has been a time of reskilling for everyone. You know, when we first we had selected just like in terms of the timeline for this iteration of trade school, we had already selected the Philly participating artists like right before the pandemic hit last year. And at the beginning of it, we had kind of these check-in meetings with everybody and heard, from all of these artists, like, I am a live artist. I don't make digital work. I don't like, this is not who I am. This is not what I do. And I think as the emergency-ness of it passed and the kind of like settling into a little bit of a new normal set in, I think, obviously all of these folks still are primarily make work that is about being physically present, but I shouldn't say all. We are working with some really cool intermediate artists as well. But there has really been an opening in terms of what the affordances of the digital space are, and what and also filmmaking and music videos and all of the other ways that it's possible to like approximate liveness in the digital space and create sort of complementary pieces that as I think, as Jennifer said, kind of like add to this three-dimensional, multi-dimensional kind of body of work.
Yeah. I'm curious from both your perspectives, how much do you feel like this, shift or just embracing of using different skills, different, sometimes digital, means is being driven by having to create differently, like that creative impulse, and how much of it is driven by the just necessity of that's kind of that's like the main way people are consuming right now or engaging with art. Obviously, I know those are not disconnected, but just as I think of like my sort of practicing artist hat, like I'm curious for you personally, or just what you're observing, where do you think that balance is? Like on what end of that spectrum or exchange is this momentum coming to use digital means?
Well, I would say the move wasn't always digital. At one of the participating artists, Emily Bate from Philadelphia, shifted. I mean, and she's a musician and composer who makes choral works, and that is kind of like the last thing that we're expecting to come back is people singing together in a room. And she created a community-supported art practice where she made kind of songs and tiny sculptures and poems and zines and offered a subscription service, so that it was kind of like the opposite of a digital experience where you got this really tactile, participatory piece of art from her that also included some links and some audio tracks and things like that. But moving in the direction of kind of more kind of bespoke, boutique, personal art making too.
Mm-hmm. I think I am a person and artist who is like, what do we have? And then move from there. And so I think for the Fly Drown team, it was like, okay, so we know so also one thing that's important to say is that Devin, the filmmaker, has been documenting my process from Fly Drown and the piece before since like 2018. And so we also had 3 years worth of footage of an archive that we really hadn't had an opportunity to really be with. Even in the Fly Drown film, we haven't even touched on what is inside the archive. And so I think it was not necessarily just like, we have to go digital, but it was like, well, we have 100 gigs of video documentation. We should look at it. And that's I think where we are right now. Thankfully, it wasn't like this drastic accommodation we had to make with ourselves, but like we already have these things, and now we have people watching, interacting through the arts in this digital way. And so it's like, how can the two meet each other?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna weave in. I feel like we're hearing threads of this answer to this question from the audience. But what changes in your creative process or your curation process will stay with you even after this pandemic is over?
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like I was a slow settling processor my whole life. And I used to like try to push against that because the world was always moving so quickly. But I feel like now that a lot of people have slowed down and joined a different pace, I feel like I can settle into like what my actual pacing is and not feel like what is the word? Sorry, my brain is doing a thing, but not feel obligated to move at a pace that is outside of what I do. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, and how I move.
Mm-hmm. And I will echo the sort of complementary side of that as a curator and organizer of arts events, which is that it's really been fruitful to move at the pace of the work, rather than letting the pace of the idea of the container kind of drive those lines, and it's kind of opened up, I think, an opportunity to rethink the cycles of these programs, what we assume are annual or we assume are like, happening every year, but it doesn't actually need to live inside that Gregorian calendar in as predictable a way as we're kind of clinging to most of the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Those are great insights. I think I'll just ask each of you to share, as sort of a closing question before we wrap up. What are you looking forward to this year? It can be artistic or not.
Dinner parties. I mean, that's a little bit glib, but also I really one of the pieces of this, the conceptual pieces of trade school that we're still kind of mourning is the idea of bringing everybody together to share a meal, and I hope that we'll be able to do that in the future.
Oh, I love a dinner party, so let me know.
Let me know.
I feel like people, especially during the summer, there was like really beautiful dreaming happening with artists in particular. And I am looking forward to like that continued dreaming, and I'm curious to see how those dreams manifest for myself. But as I was listening to other artists from across the world really have space and time to do that, I'm just excited to see how those take off.
Yeah. There's an opportunity to rethink so many assumptions in our field and in the way that we work. And I'm excited to have artists lead that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank both of you for being here and leading this conversation with us and with everyone watching, for sharing of yourselves. And I think really inviting us all to think differently about what we are doing and how we might approach this year to do beautiful dreaming. I love that phrase. I'm totally gonna you start using it. And I want to also thank everyone at home or wherever you're tuning in from for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your questions. Want to let you know that you can find more information about our other episodes of Discovery on Knight's website, kf.org. And please join us again next Thursday for an episode of The Future of Democracy. And we're going to take you out with some great music. Our intro music was composed by Chris Barr. Our exit music is by Akron jazz artist Theron Brown. And until next time, we wish you good health, safety, and joy in art. Take care.